Hey, I'm Di McQueen, licensed clinical social worker, family and addiction expert. I'm here with Dr. Brian Jackson, my longtime cohort who specializes in the field of addiction. Welcome to Healing Families Shattered by Addiction.
Di and I have worked with addicts, alcoholics, and their families for over 30 years combined. Our podcast and coaching programs focus on families who have a loved one suffering from addiction. Our experience has been that this disease affects families as much, if not more, than the addict or alcoholic.
Is your world spinning out of control? Are you codependent? Are you experiencing worry, loss of sleep, and difficulty concentrating? If so, you're in the right place. Brian and I have both personally lived it, learned it, and now we're going to teach you tools and techniques on how to get your life back that you thought was shattered by addiction.
Okay, let's dive in. Hi there, everybody. This is Dr. Brian Jackson, and I am here with my partner, Miss Diane McQueen, and we are here for Healing Families Shattered by Addiction, the name of our podcast. And today we wanted to talk about a topic that, we talk to a lot about with the person who has the alcohol use disorder or the substance use disorder, and that is people, places, and things. And a lot of times I think people get tired of hearing that, people, places, and things. And, I think there's a lot of pushback from people like, oh, I can't hang out with my old friends anymore. And so if there are people that you use with, the suggestion is that it's probably not a good idea in the short run to be around those people. And then the next question is, well, how am I going to make friends? Well, I mean, it's very interesting. If you take the suggestion and go to an AA meeting, you could probably get 10 or 20 phone numbers on your first meeting, and you'd have a whole sober network of friends that you could connect with. So, and another thing to be aware of is, the people that you used to hang out with, there's some that may be very, very supportive of your recovery. And those are the people that are really your friends. The ones who kind of say, oh, that's great, whatever, and they get on with their lives and really have no respect for drinking or drugging, in front of you, or, really poo-poo it. Those are probably acquaintances, or there may be people that have their own problems. So, there's a whole thing that goes on in our brains. So it's not just that we say, oh, well, you need to avoid these people, you need to avoid these places that you used to go to, and you need to avoid these things without any type of rationale or reasoning behind it. And there is a lot that goes on in the brain when early in recovery or even later in recovery, where you try and push the envelope and be around people you used to use with, or go to places where you used to use, or be around things that can trigger the thought of using. So Di, I didn't know if we wanted to talk about that. I mean, because dopamine is a big part of all this, but I think it would be interesting to hear your perspective on it, not only for, the person who has the alcohol or substance use disorder, but also for the families to have awareness of, maybe not recognizing or outside of their awareness that, some of the situations that they can bring their family member into might be something that's a high risk place.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, a couple things come to my mind immediately, which is, you were mentioning about, some people, kind of poo-poo it away and things like that. Oftentimes, it's also the people that they don't want us to stop using, right? Because, like, hey, I know you as Party Brian, like, you being straight is like boring. But it's
Right.
really not true. So I just wanted to kind of like some of those things are actually because it makes others so very uncomfortable. But I loved how you brought up, the family side of it. Also, people, places, and things are very, very important. It's important for the family, although I know it's one of those things where, gosh, haven't we been suffering for long enough? Like this just goes on and on and on, and we all have to change our lives. Yes, in a word, kind of true, right? Like we don't have to change our lives, but we do need to be cognizant of the fact that our loved one is struggling with something. And certainly in the short term or in the beginning, as we, have to kind of come to terms with stabilization, it is important that, if we went to the same bar or bar restaurant, you know, 3 times a week, that possibly we do change it to something different. Maybe we eat at home, or maybe we don't, we change it to a new restaurant where, it is a different kind of place, or the people that we see all the time. Because as you were kind of relating to, B, it's a trigger for our brain. If I see you and I've been partying with you for all this time, immediately my brain's dopamine starts to go, ooh, there's going to be a goodie that's involved with all of this. So it is important. Things, right? What kind of things are we talking about? A lot of times people go like, I don't understand what you mean by things. Things can be something as simple as, an attitude. Sometimes, if I get snippy with somebody or whatever, I'm the family member, remember? And I'm come home a little crabby or whatever. That thing that I do or say could be very alarming and triggering for one of someone who's in early or new recovery. But that again becomes, conversational pieces. Maybe it's, we get into a dynamic that we both aren't even aware of. And we must start to learn how to converse in a way that's going to be a healthier way to do this so that each other can understand what the other one needs, right? So maybe it's a week away, right? That might be a thing where we go on vacation and, so that's our time to like cut back and rest and relax and do our thing. But it's not a good thing for somebody, right now. And they need to be, whether you're on the family side of it, maybe it's the family side. I can remember a very dear friend of mine that used to tell me that, everything would be okay. And then they would go on vacation and her husband would be drunk the entire time and it was miserable, absolutely miserable. So if that's the case, then obviously, in that case, it's the family member that's going, you know what, I don't really want to go on vacation with you. Like, it's not a good thing. Maybe the family member needs to go on vacation with a friend or somebody else. So there's, this whole conversation and topic, I'm sure we could go on for hours about, how people, places, and things on either side of the aisle can be deeply effective for each other. So one of the things that comes to my mind immediately is how do we communicate about that? And truly being open and honest with each other so we can help one another. What do you think, B?
Well, yeah, I mean, so, when we go to things, one of the most obvious ones to me that I try to convey to people, be it the person we're working with or with the family, is that we really need to get all the alcohol out of the house.
Yep.
And so that's a thing that we can do. So let me just kind of take you through the gyration of that as a person who is in recovery, who was active in addiction with alcohol and drugs. So if I'm sitting on the couch and the thought of having a drink, maybe I have some sort of euphoric recall, and all I have to do is get up and walk to the refrigerator or walk to a cabinet and get that drink, then it's really over. But if there's no alcohol in the house, I have a craving. I have to get my rear end up out of a chair or a couch, go get in the car, drive to a liquor store and buy it. So it gives me time to think. It's like the adult rational side has some time to weigh in. And what happens is, when I used to call my drug dealer, for example, making the phone call, I would get a dopamine goodie. Okay, I'm not using any drugs, but I am getting some euphoria. I am getting some excitement. And so now I'm waiting for him to get to wherever I am. And he gets there, and my euphoria is getting more and more pronounced. And then he puts the drugs in my hand. And now I am really on go, go, go. And then I ingest the drugs, and then I'm off to the races. So we had a guy, I think, die, if you, I don't know if you remember this, but he was in the military and he just was very resistant about, all my friends hang out at this one bar. I just don't want to give up my friends. So I'm going to go to the officers club. And instead of drinking alcohol, I'm just going to sit there and drink ginger ale. Well,
I
that didn't
remember.
that didn't last very long. There's an old saying, if you hang around the barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. But let's talk about that. So
Yeah.
it's not just being in the bar and there's alcohol in the bar. This craving or this trigger of craving works on all five senses. So you have people laughing, you have the sound of music, you hear ice cubes clinking together. You look over and you see your buddy John, who maybe doesn't have a problem, but he's had a couple of drinks and he looks like he's having a good time. Now you are so close to the poisonous snake that it's almost next to impossible, especially if you're doing it with some sort of frequency and intensity as opposed to popping in once every now and then. Um, so, I mean, I think that there's a lot of contempt without investigation in terms of, hey, if you get sober and you go to an AA meeting, there's going to be all kinds of people that you meet that enjoy the same things in life that you did, be it skiing, be it golfing, be it fishing, be it whatever, bowling, but they don't drink and they have a good time and they're very welcoming and they understand where you're at. So I think that's one of the hurdles that that the person needs to get over. But back to your point, maybe the loved one has returned from treatment and you're all together and you decide to go out to a restaurant where let's say mom and dad like to have a few drinks, and then we have that same thing, the noises, this laughing, all of that stuff. The person may not drink, but it probably could become very uncomfortable for them. So it's not like
Yes.
we're asking you to change your life and change your lifestyle. I think what we're trying to point out here is to be cognizant of the fact that a lot of times it's not intentional that a person decides to pick up a drink, but the brain can go to a place where the impulse side of the brain is so stimulated by these people, places, or things that really the choice of is it a good idea to drink or not good idea to drink is so overridden by the impulse side of the brain that they'll pick up a drink. So we're just trying to avoid high risk situations. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to have to be able to be around people that drink socially for the rest of your life. But in the
Well, I
short
think
run,
that's the point, right? Right there that you're making, which is so important because everybody goes, "Oh my God, for the rest of my life, I'm never going to be able to do this." And I'm like, well, no, that's not true. Or at least it's not true for you and I, okay? And a lot of other people that we know that have been in recovery for a long time. It does become less heightened in time. Um, the other thing is, I love that you're bringing up the five senses because that is a really, really important point that most people don't think about. If you're starting to get stimulated in many different ways, and there are many different ways to get that stimulation, you need to really pay attention to that. And we need to be, again, having plans before you ever go out anywhere to be able to express, especially to family members, that if I start to feel overwhelmed, if I start to feel like this is something that may not be good for me, we need to always have like what we call a plan B, right? Which is, hey, maybe we take two different cars. Maybe I give you a look or a signal, and that means we got to get out of here. I'm not really sure I can handle this well tonight. um, those types of things where there is a communication ahead of time that will help us with very difficult situations or situations that feel a little bit risky. The other thing that I wanted to point out as well is oftentimes remember that even though those things get stimulated, when you start to romanticize and fantasize about what this is going to be like, and we forget that actually where we ended up was a really dire, awful, icky, we are no longer in the beginning honeymoon stages of our progression. We are getting much more further into it, so that if and when we do have a relapse of some kind, it's not pretty. It's not, like, oh, that moment that lasted about 10 minutes then turns into a very dark place. And I think that that's something that's incredibly important to remember and point out, which is, most of us, when we're getting into recovery, it's not been pretty for a long time. It's usually something that has caused us in every capacity. And, the family's on edge because they're still not sure what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. And, I do think it's important that the family supports in many ways, and that is through communication. Addicts and alcoholics, etc., they need to remember that family members don't read minds. They're not thinking the way that you think. And so it's very important to let them know the things that are difficult for you, and vice versa, right? If a family member is getting to a place where they're like, wow, I don't feel like I can ever go out, I've never been able to do something because everything triggers you, well, maybe they need to go out by themselves or with a friend or whatever. And that's okay too, right? Everything doesn't have to be attached at the hip, but we also need to understand that being able to be respectful, be supportive, be, conscientious of what each other needs and desires in these people, places, and things areas is going to become imperative.
Yeah, and there really needs to be a continuum of care for this dis-ease. So when we talk about dis-ease, I think a lot of people, um, as they move further and further away from the consequence, the
Yeah.
propensity for the euphoric recall to come in their brain is a lot higher than remembering the consequence. And one of the sayings we have in the program is you don't want to shut the door on the past, but you don't want to dwell on it. Because if you dwell on it, you'll repeat it. But what we see a lot is that people get further and further away and they forget. They forget the car accident they had. They forget that they lost their job. They forget that their wife left them. I mean, they might not forget it, but they're further and further away from the pain associated
Yeah.
with that.
I think that's the key
But
right
now,
there.
yeah, and then there's other situations too that I want to talk about. I mean, there are some, even in early recovery, obligatory events that you need to attend. And it could be a cousin's wedding or
Yeah.
your sister's wedding or somebody that you know. And so we kind of have a roadmap for what um, will kind of help you and protect you when you go into those situations. Um, I think it's very important to eat something before you go to the event. I think it's very important for you to arrive a little bit late.
Yep.
It's extremely important that you have your own non-alcoholic drink in your hands at all times. But the most important thing, and Di alluded to this earlier, is that you have your own transportation and a way out of there. Because when it starts to get uncomfortable, imagine you went with somebody who's drinking who wants to stay there until the bell rings at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're feeling more and more comfortable. If you have your own transportation, then you're able to make the decision to say, you know what, I've seen everybody, it's really time for me to leave because it's real important that you think about it's not about saving face, it's really about saving your ass. And I hate to be that direct, but you have to be proactive about that. And so in no way are we saying that you're going to become a hermit, and certainly not for the rest of your life, but in early recovery, the less frequency and intensity, you know, so if it's not an obligatory event, you need to learn how to say no if there's going to be alcohol involved. And sometimes that's not easy for us because we've been so used to saying yes. But I promise you, if you say no, it's not going to break anybody's heart. So,
And if it does, then, again, we go back to, how important is this person in my life if they can't understand that I'm going through this difficult time? If someone was getting cancer treatment, for instance, and they weren't feeling well that night, I don't know anybody that I can think of that's going to give you a hard time about saying, I can't do it tonight. I just can't. I don't have it in me. So, you know, everyone would be very consoling and, oh, it's, you know, perfectly okay. We certainly understand. You know, you're in early recovery. It's important that you figure out ways, and you may not know, right? I mean, sometimes we just don't know until we get to a specific place or event or a situation. But once we start to understand that, or we start to feel like, oh my gosh, I came here thinking I would be fine, and now I'm not fine, then we need to be able to have, you know, ways to be able to protect ourselves, and hopefully with the support of our loved ones, you know, and our family support. Now, does that always happen? No, it does not. Does, you know, there are times where, you know, we've heard it a million times, haven't we, B, where, you know, the family goes like, I'm sick of this. I don't want to be supportive of them. You know, then there's, you know, we need to get into like, that's about the time everybody needs to get some treatment, right? That's when you come start seeing us and go, hey, we really have some issues going on here. But in the meantime, regardless of whether or not the family is supportive or not, it is your responsibility, the addict or alcoholic, to take care of yourself, right? Or the other way around. If you're the family member and the addict or alcoholic is insisting on doing something that you're very uncomfortable with, it is your responsibility to make sure you're taking care of yourself in ways that are going to be healthy and not into straight panic mode, right? That's a lot of times where we go, which is, oh my God, this is what's going to happen. I go, no, that's when you need your support group around you, your support network, and understanding that your job is to take care of yourself and figure out how you best do that.
Yeah, and a lot of this can be appear to be complicated once the person that has the substance use disorder re-enters the family. And that's understandable, you know, because it's a whole new experience. It's a first. And there are, I don't want to say easy solutions, but sometimes when you're stuck in that, it's hard to figure out how to get out of it. How should I behave? What should I do? What should I not do? And, you know, to Di's suggestion, you know, maybe you do a free consult with us and we see where you're at and let you know whether or not we can help you. But, you know, it's just like, you know, being in a coal mine and there's somebody that's further and further down the coal mine with a flashlight that's been there, and that's kind of us. And, you know, we want to help guide you through the roadmap of how to deal with these things. Um, and you know, I just think it's just such an important topic because on the outside it may look like everything is okay, but the brain, when exposed to the poisonous snake, and the more and more it's exposed to it, the propensity to relapse is much higher. So,
Exactly.
you know, I would start with any paraphernalia in the house. Like you might have, you know, a son that smokes marijuana and he doesn't have a problem, and you know, your returning loved one that went to rehab sees that and could trigger the thought of using, even if cannabis wasn't their thing, and the alcohol, you know, completely out of the house, so that people do have time to think, as opposed to having a thought, reaching, you know, arm's length to get a drink and ingest it. So,
Agreed. So being aware, you know, understanding what's going on from a brain standpoint and chemically standpoint, from a chemical standpoint, super important. And you know, we can't stress it enough. Communicate, communicate, communicate. You know, if you're feeling uncomfortable, don't pretend like you're going to be bothering your, you know, your family members by communicating what you're feeling. Let them know. Let them know. And then, you know, as if you start to navigate these waters and you're feeling like I really don't understand what to do, reach out to people like us and say, hey, I need a little bit of help here, and we need some guidance. There's lots of tools and techniques. We're happy to have a chat with you. As Bryce said, we do free consults, and there's a wonderful family survival, like lots of information in our family survival kit on the website, which is www.familyandaddictionexperts.com. This is a deep and wide conversation, and we could go on for a very long time, but this is a beginning to scratch the surface to get you to understand this is something that whether you're on one side of the aisle or the other, you need to be aware of how people, places, and things affect you and affect the dynamic of the entire family.
Exactly. And I think it's a great topic. And for those with the substance use disorder that are in recovery, you really need to get your selfishness working for you in a positive way. As Di said earlier, you need to really be proactive for yourself and not be a people pleaser for your family and hang out in a situation where it's very uncomfortable with you, for you. You know, you need to be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm splitting
Exactly. So
without a whole lot of explanation.
As Bri always tells us, if you have a question, email us at info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. We're always happy to answer questions. We love to hear from you. We do hear from you on the regular. Please continue sending, looking up our information or sending us requests. We love that. And we look forward to our next venture together. Good. Any closing thoughts, B?
No, just thank you very much. And I think we hit on some, as simple as it may sound, people, places, and things, it really is a lot more than that. And I hope people are able to soak that in and, make decisions accordingly.
Exactly. So we are Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. And until the next time, thanks so much, B. Always a pleasure to spend some time with you. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Di.
Thanks so much for joining our podcast, Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more important tools, techniques, and ways for you to focus on you instead of the alcoholic or addict in your world.
Until then, please go to our website, familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's familyandaddictionexperts.com. You'll also see links to our Facebook and Instagram pages. Please also, if you have any emails that you would like to send us, that's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. With any thoughts, feelings, questions that you may have for us, we would love to hear from you, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.